I wanted to show you right here, this is the cool can gauge that we're gonna be running.
And this is basically your oil cap replacement.
It's time to get this loaner gearbox out of the way. Kablam! That is it. The extent of wiring and sensors in the engine bay. As you guys saw, we did a CAN Lambda from Link, and the huge advantage to using this is it is a plug and play solution for their Link ECU, and being CAN, it is much quicker reacting. So versus like a typical analog 5-volt signal, that usually has a little bit of lag, where this is pretty much instantaneous, so you have a much cleaner, quicker signal. And over here, you saw I plumbed in the 3-port boost control solenoid from Link. Got my new Deutsch connector setup going, everybody. So you can see the wiring, I thought was done pretty well. We do always use that DEI wiring loom, which is amazing. It just like makes everything look more complete and more professional and OEM. And I put a Link intake air temperature sensor into the intercooler piping. This car does have a factory IAT, but it is built into the manifold. That is a slow reacting sensor. Really what you want is a fast reacting sensor that goes here, and it being in the intercooler piping means that the temperature, you're not gonna get a ton of heat soak, so it's gonna have better accurate readings versus where it is here, where if this like heat soaks, that goes up into the sensor and then it throws your readings off. So really, if you have the option, certainly go to a fast reacting IAT. This will work, but it's not ideal. I also installed this new Link oil pressure and oil temperature sensor in one, which I really, really do love. The idea of not having two sensors, it built in, simplifies things a lot. And for those of you that recall, this was kind of the transition that I was going to have to use to get out of the block to the sensor and the feed line for the turbo. I did find this like nice stainless steel unit there that has a BSP taper thread pitch into it. So not exactly ideal, but it's still gonna work into the BSP. And that to me is gonna be a way better solution than having this that could potentially fail. Here is our Link G4 ECU, fully programmable. This really, in my opinion, is the way to go for an aftermarket ECU that controls things like boost, timing. You pretty much have all the power at your fingertips with an ECU like this. And my favorite thing about these ECUs is they bolt into the stock casing. This is actually a D series case that we picked up because the B series one we had, we didn't want to cut up just yet. And you can see this will bolt in as such. And it's just super simple, super easy that way. You can see the plugs go in there, and then this now mounts back into your stock location. So there's not like anything to figure out where to put this. I know wiring can be intimidating. It's actually intimidating to me, but really this ECU does make things easy, and it's all about, you know, how many sensors you're adding, but it is in the grand scheme very, very simple. With like something like this is an expansion port that plugs into the ECU. You don't actually have to do a lot of splicing into the factory harness. So I just, with that expansion port, you know, I add my temperature signal, my pressure signal, my 5 volt, my ground. For the boost controller, I do have to tap into ECU power, but again, expansion port. And for CAN power, I have two things, which is a power and a ground. And that's really the extent of the wiring. So, you know, it's, if you're worried about, you know, and intimidated about doing a job like this really is something you can do it yourself. Everything was wired in, so let's see what it looks like. We've got power, ECU connected. There it is, everybody. I wanted to show you right here, this is the cool CAN gauge that we're gonna be running. This does need to be set up, but you can, you know, cycle through basically everything, a lot of parameters once you set this up, and it'll show it to you, you know, right next to your gauge cluster. The other thing I wanted to comment on, you know, some people will say, okay, this is $1,100. Shop Jimmy O. Jimmy O is a Link retailer, and he sells these for about $1,100. If you were to go buy, for example, an S300 for a B series ECU, like a P72 or whatever, and those are anywhere from like $200 to $400, you have to install it. And by the time you do that, like that is essentially almost the price of one of these Link ECUs. And it's old hardware, and you're putting a piggyback system into it. So my take is always go with something like this. It's new, and this is like fully programmable. We are jumping back into the engine bay to do a few things. And as you can see, our DC5 Creations AC lines for the B series have shown up. So let's see if we can make this AC work. Believe it or not, we do have to take the fender off for this relocation kit, and that is because this is a tuck kit. So the hoses you'll see in a second are gonna run here, and then they're gonna route through here. The trouble is, because this is kind of like a tuck kit and it's made for show cars, a lot of guys will relocate the battery, and we're trying to keep our stock battery, and they relocate this whole fuse box. So that usually makes, you know, easy access over to here, but because we're keeping all this, it's gonna be a tight fit, and we're gonna have to figure out where to drill. So yeah, this is gonna be a little bit more work than I anticipated. You can see we now have all of the tuck lines run here, and my game plan is to notch a hole such as this into the side of the metal here, and then we'll be able to pass the lines you can see through here, and then hope and pray that it's gonna clear the fuse box and we can get the battery box in there. the fittings will tighten up. Woof. That was tricky, but as you can see, we got it to work here. I even put a little bit of the rubber grommet that was supplied by DC5 Creations. You can see we're pretty low here. Usually what he would do is have it run through the center, but we want to try to keep this guy here, and you can see, man, oh, if I push down on this, look at that. This is gonna bolt up, DP.
Great.
Wicked. So the next problem here is the battery box. So here's the factory battery tray, and you can see it's just getting hung up just a little bit right here on this fitting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to lop this section off, which I hope will give us the clearance we need. You can see there is the cut line that I had to do, and the fittings look like they've got lots of space. Let's see if the battery fits. Oh, it's tight, DP, but you know what?
Look at that.
It's in there.
Look at that.
The real problem, I think, is gonna be getting a tie down in, because you know, that rod usually does stick out quite a bit. Let's see what happens here. Well, certainly not gonna be in the middle, DP, but look.
It hooks on there.
It's hooked on here, it's hooked on there. We'll just crank this down and it'll live like that. And we did it though. This is a milestone. Look, we got this in. We have the battery in its factory spot. We have the fuse box here that's gonna bolt up like that. Man, I'm proud. Now we just gotta figure out what we're gonna do here. DC5 Creations sends us these P clips and these self tappers, so I'm thinking I'm just gonna send it like this. See what happens here, everybody. Does feel somewhat wrong to do that into a Honda, you know. They're just
EG, bro.
Exactly. You're right, DP. You're right.
It's not an NSX.
All right, there you go.
Here.
And I think what we'll do with this guy is just like zip tie it on. You can't go any higher. I just checked, like the fender line is right about here, so we'll be good. And you can see I'm well within like the range here, where not, even if we were running super low, the wheel wouldn't kind of like come up. Just finalizing the AC setup here, and there is one thing that I had to do. This pressure switch usually lives on the driver's side, so this kit does move it over here, which means I had to extend the plug here quite a way, so it runs all the way now across here. You can see we just zip tied this line up here all the way over back to the plug here. But with that done, I think we can officially say we are ready for some AC.
When you add a bunch of boost or a bunch of RPM to an engine, it's generally a good idea to add a catch can to allow the crankcase to breathe. And for that, we are going with this quick vent 1.1 unit from Level 7 Performance, same company that made the front rebar for us. These are really, really impressive units. As you can see, there's a housing with two -10 fittings off the back of it, and this is basically your oil cap replacement. So this unit sits on top of the valve cover, and then this threaded nut, if you like, is what's gonna hold that adapter to the valve cover. And then you've got your oil cap that you'll be able to pull and, you know, add oil as needed. So once that threads in there, if I wasn't spazzing out on it so much, you can see this is threaded with the breather built into it, and that just threads in there like your oil cap would normally. You need a 34 mil socket to tighten this nut down to hold the unit in place, and you can actually get this from Level 7. Pretty awesome too that he makes it a double-sided, 35 on one side, 34. I've never seen that before, very cool. But he does say on his website you could just use like a non-impact 34 mil socket if you have one handy. So we will torque this down to the specified 48 foot-pounds, and we'll be able to move on to the next step. Oh, I should mention, you can get this housing in a different style that kind of like waterfalls over the back of the valve cover, and it hides these fittings down on the back of the engine, which is a really stealth, slick look. However, it doesn't work on the non-VTEC valve covers like ours. It only works on a VTEC valve cover. And for a catch can, we are using Level 7's HS550. I'm guessing the 550 stands for like milliliters capacity. That's just my metric system guess, but look at the quality of this thing. Like, look at the bracket on it. Like this beautiful billet anodized bracket. It's got these nice swivel fittings on the top. It's a properly designed catch can. It's all like CFD designed. There's chambers in there. There's stainless steel, mesh in there to separate the oily vapors from the rest of the air. It's got a nice little drain on the bottom. By the way, look at the artwork on this box. Like the attention to detail on the product, but also on the box. Like beautiful drawings everywhere. I'm just blown away that this is basically a one-man operation that's doing this out of Oregon, I think you said, Pete, right?
Yeah.
So props to Andre at level 7. This is really nice stuff. I think the best home we could find for it is down here on the frame rail on the passenger side. You can see this bracket's actually going to work out really nicely. It's the perfect size for this space. It gives us a nice sort of like downward trajectory for the lines to meet the can. So just a couple self-tappers in there, PT? Just whap, or are we going to put some rib nuts in there?
Self-tappers, self-tappers, sure.
All right, let's do it. There you go, fellas. The catch can setup is complete, and you didn't really think we were going to use self-tapping screws to attach that beautiful billet bracket? I mean, that would just be the hackery of all hackery. So yes, we did use some riv nuts in there, which worked out great. It's a really nice, secure setup. As you can see, the lines are completed here. Nice downhill pathway to them, so you won't get pooling in the lines. And what a simple, elegant solution this is to a nice big breather setup. Typically, you would have to grind off the coating on your valve cover, drill holes, weld on AN fittings, get it recoated. Very expensive, time-consuming, technical challenge. If you're not a welder, you got to outsource that. Where this is just a nice bolt-on solution that gives you that same level of performance. So I think a very cost-effective, very simple, very elegant solution. Well done, level 7, and well done, PT, with the riv nuts.
Our B16A2 gearbox just arrived from PCM Auto, and it is now equipped with an M Factory helical limited slip differential, because this is the factory one. Boo, who wants an open diff? Nobody. And Phil over there was telling us, usually he's like, they're all the gears are worn out, there's like sludge inside of them, but he said this thing is in remarkably good shape, which is a great thing to hear. And the last thing he did is he swapped out the 5th gear for us to the LS1 that Aaron provided when we bought this car. So this is the 5th gear from the B16A2. You can see right here, nicely wrapped. And some of you in a previous episode, I did show this, and some of you said, well, you're gonna run out of 4th gear on the racetrack. And that is true, but realistically, the goal for this car has never been as a track car. I would have kept that 5th gear as is. This is more of a street car, and having that 5th gear is gonna be amazing on the highway. This thing is going to go from like buzzing away to just being a real nice cruiser, and then you can tip into that turbo at like 3,000 RPM DP, and it's just gonna and it's gonna whoosh you ahead. So it is all win. So we're gonna actually swap this in right now before we go any further because we kind of want to start final assembly and we couldn't do that without this. It's time to get this loaner gearbox out of the way. Kablam! Doesn't get easier than that, everybody. And that means it is time to bolt up our flywheel. And for that, we are going with what we always go with, a spec aluminum flywheel. This thing is seriously light, which is not a bad thing. And I will put some thread lock on this, everybody. Yes, but I just want to put this on here right now just to get it temporarily into place. And then we will do all of the other bolts. I'm going with a stage 1 spec clutch and taking a bit of a gamble. This thing's rated to about 260 foot-pounds at the crank. So who knows, we might see 200 foot-pounds to the wheels, maybe a little bit more. So it's gonna be right at that limit, but I really want the street friendliness of a fully faced organic clutch. Now to just torque these all to 19 foot-pounds, and that is it. Ready for that sound, everybody? Let's see. So this one I lined up too perfectly. Usually they got a good little like vacuum pop.
Yeah, there you go.
There it is. You heard it there? There we go. It. And really one last thing to note about the spec clutches, I really like, my favorite thing about them is they are balanced from the factory if you get them with the flywheel. So you can see this mark here, you line this up and this has now been properly balanced, which, you know, never hurts. 10 minutes and this bad boy is back in. Oh, like I said, I love doing Honda transmissions, and we are now going to be putting on this front transmission mount. I don't even
frame rail
mount. It's mounted to the transmission frame rail mount.
Sure, there you go.
That's what we're gonna go with. This car actually had Megan Racing ones on here, and funny enough, I was like, wow, there's a lot of vibration in this vehicle for, you know, a stock B series when we started this car up. And you can see this one actually does not have much deflection at all. You can see it's actually really tight. I can barely get it to move. Versus the hard race one that we're gonna be running. And this one, look everybody, look how much more compliance this is gonna have. So I think this is going to reduce the vibration that we had quite a bit. By the way, guys, check out the mother load of parts here from Hard Race that we got from Stage 4 Motorsports. I put in like a big order. I was like, you know what? We need stuff for the EF. We've got other projects. I just want to get it all now. And it's kind of cool to see it all laid out here, DP. It looks really neat. Here we are. I am glad to see those Megan Racing lower front transmission side and engine side mounts go. As you saw, the hardware ones are softer, but they are a little bit stiffer than stock. So you do get the better performance per se over stock, but not something like those where they're just like almost race setup. And I'm pretty sure the vibration that this engine had will be all but gone. Anytime we run the hard race mounts, we always find they're like that perfect blend of performance and comfort. Well, sadly, we have come to the end of the episode. We've run out of time, and man, it just feels like progress is good, but it's not happening quick enough. And what's that saying, DP? The last 10% of a project takes 90% of the time, right? But we are getting closer, everybody. We're just gonna basically like go through a proper like bolt check, bolt everything on one final time, and then we can get to pouring some oil into this thing. The next episode, we hope to start this bad boy. So, thank you guys so much for watching. If you certainly enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.